Christopher Chappell as our keynote speaker, and we have this inaugural session is presided over by our VC, Professor Madhusudan Pinna. So this 6-day international webinar is being conducted as part of our Silver Jubilee celebrations of the university, and at the behest of International Yoga Day on 21st June. 21st June. And this in this webinar, we are collaborating with Indic Academy, who have helped us in getting on board some of the speakers in the next few days, coming few days. So without much ado, I request Shri Amit Bhargavji to kindly start this session with his Vaidika Mangalacharya.
Harihi Om Pavakanaha Sarasvati Paje Sripajini Vati Jidanyam Vastudhiya Vasuhu Maho Arnaha Sarasvati Paracheta Yati Ketuna Diyo Prishava Pirajati Harihi Om.
Dhanyawada Acharya. Now I request our each of the Department of Yogic Sciences and Holistic Health, Professor Kalapini Agasti Madam, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Namasabhayai Namo Namaha. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyama Asmad Acharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Very good evening to all of you. On the occasion of International Yoga Day, in the aegis of Silver Jubilee celebration of our university, the Department of Yogic Science and Holistic Health of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University, in collaboration with Indic Academy, has organized a 6-day Yoga International webinar on the theme Yoga, Current Trends and Research. In its inaugural function, I welcome today's chief guest, Honorable Professor Srinivas Varkhedi Sir, Vice Chancellor of Central Sanskrit University, New Delhi. Keynote speaker, Honorable Christopher Chappell, Professor Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles. President of this program, Honorable Professor Madhusudan Pinna, Vice Chancellor of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University. I also welcome Honorable Professor Nagaraj Paturi, who has permitted us to organize this webinar in collaboration with his esteemed institution. A warm welcome to Honorable Registrar, Deans, Head of the Departments, all faculty members of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University. I also take this opportunity to welcome all the participants present here from all over the India and abroad. I welcome you all in this academic venture. Department of Yogic Science and Holistic Health of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University is contributing a lot in spreading yoga for the welfare of the society by organizing seminars, workshops, training camps, and so on. This webinar is an innovative step in this regard, where the recent trends and research perspective of yoga will be focused. Nowadays, the whole world has realized and recognize the importance of yoga for the welfare of the mankind. It has the potential to make the society healthy by its healing capacity. Thus, it has occupied an important place in Indian knowledge system. Its interdisciplinary approach has many avenues to explore the study with other branches of knowledge. It also got an important place in national education policy. Considering all these aspects of yoga, the theme of the webinar is designed and planned special lectures to focus interdisciplinary approach, research, and current trends of yoga in this 6-day program. To meet this objective of the webinar, we have invited very nationally and internationally reputed scholars to present their views. Hope this webinar will be a memorable event for the participants. It is our honor that in this academic venture, we have been associated with Indic Academy, a pioneer institution in the field of Oriental studies. I convey my sincere gratitude to Professor Paturi sir for this association. I also convey my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Varkhedi sir and Professor Chappell sir for accepting our invitation and their august presence in this inaugural session. My sincere thanks to Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Penna sir for his guidance and support to organize such an innovative program. I congratulate coordinators of this webinar, Srinivas sir, Dr. Jayaraman sir and Mithilesh sir for their planning, coordination and execution of the webinar. Once again, I welcome and thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for setting up the stage for the 6-day webinar. And further, I request Professor Srinivas Varkhedi sir to kindly guide us through his chief guest address. Professor Varkhedi sir.
भवति यदनुभावात् एडमोपोऽपि वाग्मी जडमतिरपि जन्तुर्जायते प्राज्ञमौलिः सकलवचनचेतो देवता भारती सा मम वचस्य निधत्तां सन्निधिं मानसे च. I am indeed very happy to be part of this program. The international webinar on yoga, current trends and research, organized by Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University in association with Indica, especially as part of university's Silver Jubilee celebrations. This is 1 week program. Today, this program is inaugurated. Honorable Chairperson and Vice Chancellor of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University, Professor Madhusudan Pennaji, the Director of Indica Academy, Professor respected Nagaraj Paturi Garu, and the convener of this program, Professor Kalapini Agasti, and the keynote speaker of this entire 5 days webinar, Professor Christopher K. Chappell, Professor Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles, and my friends and colleagues, Pandit Srinivas Jammala Madka and Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan, Director of Indica Yoga, and of course my colleagues and students of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit Vidyapith. I'm not an expert of yoga, but I'm an end user of yoga. Therefore, I think this qualifies me to speak a few words on yoga, because I'm a good beneficiary of yoga. As I know, yoga shastram, yoga is a practical aspect of life. In one sense, for yoga, there is a science, that is Yoga Shastra. This Yoga Shastra is, according to me, it is Shastranam Shastramuttama. It is not a discipline, one among the others. Rather, we should call this is a discipline of all disciplines, discipline of disciplines. Shastranam Shastram. It includes theoretically Vedanta. It includes Nyaya Vaisheshika for its discussions, debates, and Sankhya for its ontological structures, and of course many other shastras. Without using Vak, we cannot initiate any sort of yoga. Therefore, of course, Vyakarana is also part of it. So, if we if we understand Yoga Shastra, it is a Shastra of Shastras, discipline of disciplines. As we understand mathematics is base of all sciences. It is not base of all sciences, but it is the outcome of all sciences. In one sense, when all Shastras function and they do deliver something, what we get is Yoga Shastra. Phalarupena. Therefore, Yoga Shastra gives us a clear approach to our life. In Bhagavad Gita, we know that yoga is defined in many ways. Ultimately, yoga is not just limited to asana. Asana is the beginning part of it. And many people confuse Kriya with asana. Kriyas are Kriyas and asanas are asanas. And we begin with Kriya, then we end up with asana, because Sthira Sukham Asanam. Then we enter into the first step of our yoga. And yoga is a spectrum. It does not have any beginning and end. Any point of time, that is a chakra kind of thing. So we should understand that it is yoga is just life. It is lifestyle. If we do not change our lifestyle according to Yoga Shastra, we fail to live. That means the life goes into imbalance, and that is the depth while living. Therefore, if at all we want a good life, instead life while living, we need to go to Yoga Shastra. Why? Because yoga is yoga karmasu kaushalam. So all our actions, life is full of actions. And yoga is a finest point of our all our actions. It is finest point because it is kaushalam, means how best we utilize our actions to get the good results. So just by translating the word kaushala into skill, we don't get it actually. This is the finest point of our all actions so that we get good results, good outcomes. Everyone does act. Everyone, does some activity to get some results. But when he takes the activity to its finest point, then he will get proper results. Therefore, Krishna defines it yoga karmasu kaushalam. So therefore, this kriya and asana and yamaniyama pranayama etc. will teach us how to act with all skills. So that adds skills to our action, and those actions make our life wonderful. Therefore, in one sense, yoga is a finishing school of our life. It's a finishing school. Learn everything and come to Yoga Shastra and then make your life, create your life. That's where we should understand where Yoga Shastra stands. Begin with Yoga Shastra and end with Yoga Shastra. Even all our Gurukula system, we should start with yoga and end with yoga. Otherwise, all our Shastras become useless. Ultimately, we are here to create a good life. That happens only with the help of Yoga Shastra. And second point is, yoga is a balance. Samatvam yoga uchyate. I mean, balance. I mean, balancing the unequal things. This is very important. In life, we don't get everything is equal. Everything we get in life is not equal. We get only unequal things in our life. So even our body, if you examine, one part is weak and one part is strong. And one part of our body is everybody's. I mean, it is not, considered that nobody is exactly like a statue. Statues can be built, created with balance. They are very correct in proportion. But our body is not in just that proportionate, because it has got unequal things. Yet we balance them. So that balancing part is God's gift. If we don't use that in proper way and balance our body and balance our mind, balance our life, we fail in living our life. Therefore, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate is balance. Getting balance in unequal things is an art. Therefore, Yoga Shastra is a science, Yoga Shastra is a practice, and Yoga Shastra is an art. So, Esha Vidyapi asti, Esha Kriyapi asti, Kausalamapi asti, skill, and Esha Kalapi asti. So, this is so beautiful. I mean, one Shastra, one discipline with three aspects. I mean, it's Vidya, it is knowledge, it is skill, and it is art. So this is what attracts me to Yoga Shastra. And secondly, when such a knowledge, such a discipline expands itself, naturally you will have many shakhas. In our Vedanta or any theory, when it gets expanded, and it goes into many shakhas. It is so natural. You can't expect that the theories, the exact practices and procedures, SOPs, whatever Yoga Shastra defines, those should be intact, and they should be practiced as they are described in Yoga Shastra. Don't expect that. And nothing in India, in Bharat, is prescribed equal to everyone. No, it is pratisvika. Shastra is, in one sense, it is, when we understand any Shastra, it is a generic theory. But when you apply it, it becomes pratisvika. It becomes individualistic. That means each person who practices it has his own unique nature. Accordingly, these should be added and used. It is like a medicine. Medicine, even though medicine is prescribed generally, but each person, according to his age, and he should take the medicine as per the advice of the doctor, as per his nature and time and location. These are the differences we should consider when we take the medicine. Similarly, Yoga Shastra also is not common to all. One common procedure, no, I don't believe in that. Though for all practical purposes, we teach common protocol, but that each common protocol will be, when practiced, it will be a different practice for everyone. So therefore, in my body, in my understanding, something happens, and at some point of time, I reach the result and I reach the highest point of enjoyment. For somebody, he has to wait, and he has to push himself to that point after getting it. For example, pranayam, when we perform pranayam, everyone will not get the result at the same point of time. Somebody will get in one point of time, somebody will get another point of time. All these shows that Shastra, when it is practiced, it becomes pratisvika. So naturally, our approach to the research should be like this. As we know, Panini and Patanjali, they have done this. So though generic ideas are given, but there are apavadas, and those apavadas will make the Shastra powerful, applicable to each one. Therefore, this Utsarga Apavada Nyaya is one of the best way to understand Shastra. Therefore, what I request is this: the researchers should really find out the not the common part. Common part is already available, but find out the apavadas, exceptions while conducting research. Then how to accommodate each one of us into the sphere of yogic practices. So ultimately, for each one of us, different yoga shastra is required. Ultimately, we have to create that. So that those many branches will be opened, and then we can think that this is the common part, and the rest of things are different branches of yoga shastra. This is the possibility. Therefore, there are n number of possibilities for research in yoga shastra. I request you, because this is the new trend, we need to take home the message to because only with this Bharat can become Vishwaguru. Only yoga is the tool to make India Vishwaguru. With these words, I congratulate the organizers for organizing such a wonderful webinar, and I thank them for giving me this opportunity to share some of my end users' perception. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving us a wonderful, setting up the atmosphere, wonderful atmosphere for this 6-day webinar by giving us the throwing light upon the multifaceted nature of the of Yoga Shastra and its applicability, and moreover focusing upon the interdisciplinary research aspects, which is the core of the NEP and even of this webinar, the main objective which we thought about. So I thank you once again for being present here. Next, I would I invite Shri Christopher Chappell, sir, for the keynote address. And before that, I wish to just give us a short introduction of Christopher Chappell. So, Professor Christopher K. Chappell is an Indologist and scholar of the religions of India, namely Yoga, Jainism, and Buddhism. He is the Doshi Professor of Indic and Comparative Theology at Loyola Marymount University, Los Angeles. He has written several books on history and philosophy of yoga and on the intersection of yoga, religion and ecology. Shri Chappell has received his bachelor's degree in comparative literature and religious study at the State University of New York at Stony Brook in 1976. He went on to complete his master's degree in Buddhism in 1978 and PhD in history of religion in 1980 at Fordham University. He has many works to his credit. Some of them are Karma and Creativity, Non-Violence to Animals, Earth and Self in Asian Traditions, and etc. So we are very much fortunate to have him as the keynote speaker for today's inaugural session. So once again, I welcome Christopher Chappell, sir, and I request him to kindly deliver the keynote address.
I welcome Professor Chappell, and I'm happy to share that today in this webinar as an audience, Professor Arindam is here with me. He wants to say, namaskar to you.
Oh, wonderful, sir. Wonderful.
Yes.
So, real Atithi. Sir, namaskar, sir.
Hi, Chris. It's amazing to see you. I had no idea. I've just arrived.
It is really thrilling, sir.
Yes, Chris and I have a yoga about yoga. And
Yeah, exactly.
and that is Yoga Vasishta. And I'm sure Chris will mention that. Where is this happening?
It's happening in Kalidas University.
Acha, in Ramtek. So
Yeah,
it's happening in Ramtek.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, so nice to see you.
I feel honored to be in the company of so many dear friends. And I want to, first of all, thank Dr. Varakati for his wonderful hospitality, along with so many of others, Dr. Pena and Dr. Srinivas as well. My wife and I visited your fine institution in 2019 while we were living in India on a Fulbright. And what I would like to do in sharing is to give a little bit of background and context. I want also to acknowledge what Professor Chakrabarty has already introduced, the importance and the centrality of the Yoga Vasishta in terms of bringing so much of yoga, not only to a point of understanding the philosophy, but also understanding the life of an accomplished yogi. And the best descriptions of the Jivan Mukta are to be found within the Yoga Vasishta. And I did my PhD on the Yoga Vasishta, and Arindam, Professor Chakrabarty, rekindled my connection with that text some years ago. So what I want to do is to first talk about sadhana. And sadhana is a commitment to daily practice. And as India builds out yoga within the context of wellness and health, it's important to understand that yoga, as Professor Varakati had so eloquently spoken about, is a beginning and an end and all the way through the middle. So as a person of yoga, I'll just give a little bit of a narrative that I had a scoliosis, I had teenage angst, emotional turmoil, and discovered first the rhythm of meditation when I was 13, first in the Zen tradition, and then in the Quaker Religious Society of Friends traditions. And then at the age of 15, I began a program of yoga asana. And then at the age of 18, had the good fortune of meeting Gurani Anjali Inti. And this year is a rather remarkable year, reflectively in terms of my own experiences of yoga. In October 1972, she dedicated a center called Yoga Anand Ashram on the South Shore of Long Island. And I met her in November, and then a couple of months later moved to Long Island and engaged in a sustained sadhana, which I continue for 12 years. And this includes a rhythm of daily remembrance of the yamas and niyamas. It includes pranayama, asana, dharana. It includes weekly fasting, weekly silence for at least part of the day. And with this ground, now 50 years in the making, there is a degree of health and a degree of happiness that, had I not engaged in yoga, would simply not have been possible. And I share her photograph here. She passed some 20 years ago, and yet her work carries on. So I wanted to honor, Guru Purnima is coming up soon, Granny Anjali Inti. Her family of origin came from Assam, and she learned yoga in Calcutta as she was growing up in the 1940s. She migrated to the United States and dedicated the ashram that she established in 1972. So I want to just emphasize that yoga is both theory and practice. And what Dr. Varaketi said that's so important, it is always individual. So where did it all begin? And I want to lift up a beautiful word that was used where Dr. Varaketi said art. He said knowledge, skill, art. And that word art brings us all the way back to the Rig Veda. And as we immerse ourselves in Vedic literature, we see that the pinnacle of achievement through ritual and through the meditative practices that are in very preliminary form put forth in the Vedas, that all of this builds to an experience of the Rita. The Rita, which is, as an old Indo-European word, amply evident in things that we value today, including art itself, including, and again, cousin word, cognate word, ritual, including rite, including order, and including rhythm. Right? All of these words give testimony. They affirm the centrality of Rita as achieving that moment of the good. We fast forward a few hundred years into the Upanishads. And in the early Upanishads, we see discussions about translating the external ritual into an understanding of the workings of the human body. We see great honor given to food, Anam Brahman, and we see great honor given to the breath, the foundation of all life. And as the Upanishads were being composed, probably around 600 or 800 BC, a word comes along, it might have been a little bit later, but a word appears in the Upanishads called yoga that takes that, again, old Vedic word, which is about harnessing the horses to chariots, and says what we need to do is to harness our mind and our senses and our intention to something greater. That we must take our individual self, our Atman, get it organized, put it in order, find that wonderful rhythm and artistry within life, so that we have a higher purpose, so that we are moving not just out of a place of selfishness, but we're moving with Brahman. And I'd like to think that Atman, here it's a little bit of fanciful etymology, but Atman is moving along with the breath, okay? Each individual possessing breath. Brahman is moving along with Burha, like in Burhad Aranyaka, the great forest, but the great. And this magnificence of the universe, the Vishwa, is inseparable from our very breath, and our breath becomes the gateway, the portal into that connection that gives us that sense of remarkable, enduring well-being. So then from the Upanishads, we move forward yet again, and we have simultaneously two camps emerging. Among the bardic folk, the Kshatriyas who are traveling from here to there, telling these remarkable stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, we see new expressions of the truths of the Upanishads being rendered, perhaps already invoked, most famously in the Bhagavad Gita, where we have Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. We have descriptions in the 6th chapter of how to meditate, how to breathe, how to focus the mind. And then at the same time, we have the emergence of the philosophers. And just as we had Yajnavalkya and Satyakama and so many others in the Upanishads, so also this archetype, this actual reality of the learned sage philosopher becomes so central to how we begin to continue to organize and describe the world. And first with the Brahma Sutra, then Nyaya Sutra, Vaisheshika, summaries, all of that explaining how the world works. And then we have the already invoked Sankhya system, Mimamsa, how do we conceptualize the purpose of these rituals that continue from Vedic times? And then, of course, we have the emergence within the first couple of centuries, almost 2,000 years ago, of the Yoga Sutra itself. But I want to, before we go into a very quick summary of the Yoga Sutra, I want to lift up particularly the name Kapila, associated from the beginning with Sankhya. And I also want to point out that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha himself, was born in Kapilavastu, modern-day southern Nepal. If you've not visited, I highly recommend a visit to Kapilavastu. It's a destination. You can get there from Gorakhpur rather easily. It's a destination celebrated by all of the Buddhist nations of the world. Each has constructed its own temple and meditation center representing Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana traditions. And as we look at the wisdom shared by Kapila, as we look at the wisdom shared by the Buddha, we see this grappling with the difficulty of the human condition. What Patanjali later called the 5 kleshas, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinavesha, hatred, greed, delusion. We are troubled people, no denying. And that insight is coupled with, so what do we do about this? And what Kapilavastu, rather Kapila, the philosopher, and his later interlocutor, Ishvara Krishna, said is that we've got to understand that there's this gnawing, annoying part of always going forward and doing and making and creating and grabbing and taking and giving and expecting, and that this, which comes to be characterized as the realm of the 3 gunas, is in service of that higher purpose, is in service of that witness consciousness that remains forever free. And this philosophy, a paradoxical philosophy in so many ways, this philosophy lays out a program for human capacity, that we are not only this, we are not only the going hither and yon, but we're also this. We are that stability. We are that witness, watching it all as if from above. And every day when we perform sadhana, when we meditate, when we do our asana, pranayama, dharana, dhyana, we remind ourselves, we put ourselves into that place. And as Patanjali notes, the more that we do that, we create pathways that go like this, rather than always down here like this. So with that broad sketch and the introduction of the names Kapila, Buddha, Patanjali, I want also to invoke two other names, historical personages, Parshvanath from about 850 BC, and Mahavira, a contemporary of the Buddha, all of them in the northeast section, sort of around Benares and above. We look at Kapila Vastu, again, that northeast segment of India. And what Parshvanath and Mahavira, the 23rd and 24th Tirthankaras of the Jain faith, what they brought was a way of seeing life, suffusing every aspect of the world. And they also brought focused attention to the vratas, to the yamas, holding dearly to ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. They laid out, as did the Buddha, a monastic path. In Jain faith, overwhelmingly women, 2 to 1. And in Buddhism, initially only men, but then women were allowed in. And these heroic individuals became the example to follow. And in their firm adherence to those 5 great vows, whether Buddhist, yoga person, or a Jain practitioner, that these vows became the anchor for a life well lived. And then eventually, not only did the monks and nuns, through their connections with the lay people who supported them, who gave them food, who gave them shelter, who gave them clothing, they also began to encourage the lay people themselves to adapt these vows for daily life. And you saw earlier the image of my own teacher, and she so emphasized that these tools for good living are, yes, for monks and nuns, and equally important for informing a life lived with purpose. So then we move forward through the centuries a little bit, and we get next a document from the 6th century called the Yoga Bindu. And it was composed, it's not well known, I've just completed the 2nd ever English translation of this text while I was on my Fulbright. And it was composed in the 6th century by a scholar called Haribhadra Virahanka. And what we know of this scholar is that he was a very profoundly well-trained Brahmin who knew all of what is to be known in the Upanishads and in the Brahma Sutra. He had also studied Patanjali, as well as he had beckoned a couple of his nephews to go and learn all of that philosophy of Dharmakirti. He quotes Dharmakirti, learn that Buddhist perception that says, really everything is falling apart, you really don't even have a self. And then he came forward after years of investigation with this text called the Yoga Bindu. And he said, it all boils down to these essentials, that every person of faith grapples with karma, klishta karma, avidya, asmita, raga, devesha, abhinavesha, lobha, krodha, moha, in the Buddhist rendering, abhimana, that pride. And that what we need to do is to, through yoga, allow those clouds of karma that obscure our bright sunny nature, to allow them to simply dissipate. And whether we say there's a self or not a self, whether we say that there are gods or there aren't gods that have efficacy in the world, doesn't matter. What matters is the ongoing purification soul. And he lays out synoptic fivefold yoga that says that first, we have to self-interrogate. Second, we have to cultivate a fine practice. Third, we have to meditate and cleanse our subtle body that holds all those residuals that cause the expression of klishta karma. And that fourth, that through this purity, we need to reach a state of abiding meditation. And then finally, we will be able to achieve kashaya. We will be able to achieve vritti kashaya, which means that all of that bubbling around that hurts us, that hurts other people, will eventually dissipate. That's one, right? First, karma. Second, do your yoga. Third, what is this thing called yoga? And I want to lift up something that is probably near and dear to many of you. Two things. One is puja. And he says, gives this wonderful list of honor the great teachers, honor your parents, bring out the flowers, bring out the incense, bring out the fine food, and create that ambiance that supports the notion of greatness. And then there's a wonderful description of a practice that is also described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra of performing japa. By going into that rhythm, by going into that place of ritta, through the recitation of mantra, through the process, even perhaps of singing, and then going back to the Upanishads and to the Satipatthana of the Buddha, going back to engaging the rhythm that arises as one focuses on the breath, that there will be an arising of, let's just call it goodness. Okay? Now, a few centuries go by and Tantra comes along and everybody's grappling. Oh no, what do we do with Tantra? What do we do with these articulations of the chakras and Kundalini? And what do we do with rituals that invite us to encounter those very dark places within our psyche, put it out on the table and say, this is really what it's all about, with the idea, and I studied Tantra with Buddhist practitioners that arrived at the conclusion that the 5 M's are to be engaged in once so that all of your questions are answered and that you no longer need to be curious. You no longer need to feed that yearning, the moments of secrecy. And what the Jains did was that they said, well, let's think about this a little bit different. Let's think about all of those klishta karmas and then employ, now the gateway to dharana, the gateway to really dhyana, as we learned it in Yoga Ananda Ashram, is articulated, and thank you, Arindam, in the Yoga Vasishta so elegantly. And my latest book is called Living Landscapes, Meditations on the Five Elements in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain yogas. And I spent 20 years translating texts that talk about this practice. But first, you focus on the earth, as we did for a month, morning and night for 20 minutes, thinking, watching, writing. And then water, fire, air, space. Good 5-month project. And what the Jains did is they said, think of the earth as all of those difficult petals on the lotus, at the base of the lotus, that are the karmas that have accrued over lifetimes and lifetimes. And then use your focus, use your capacity to meditate, use your capacity of tapas to incinerate them. So earth, fire. And then in a text called the Gyanarnava, later echoed in the Yoga Shastra of Hemachandra in the 11th century, says, breathe, 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 breathe. And stir up the monsoon wind clouds, and then sweat it out, and weep it out, and invoke the water to purify to purify. So then all of the ash is washed away, and you sit there, not different from the Tirthankara, not different from the highest of yogis. You sit there in that Siddhaloka for at least a little bit of time. And in knowing the capacity for freedom, and getting that taste for freedom, it becomes all the more easy to adhere to the ethical path. So that brings us into the Hatha Yoga literature, which again is about 1,000 years old. And about that time of the Yoga Shastra, there were other texts coming forward that begin to delineate a range of asanas beyond Padma Asana and beyond Kayotsarga, which is standing still. And in my own personal exploration of asana, which again, I'm more than 50 years in our bodies, we carry so much tightness, so much history, so much attitude. And by stretching the fascia and by breathing into those places of release that Mr. BKS Iyengar was so articulate about, cleaning it out, find your best approximation of symmetry, that a well-being came about that is tied to, if you're having this problem, stand on your head. You're having digestive problems, lean yourself forward. You're having depression problems, rise up into Nagasana. And all of that literature that came into full force starting around, let's say, 500 years ago, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Garanda Samhita, Shiva Samhita, so many. There's a wonderful project at the School for Oriental African Studies that is examining this literature and bringing it forth for the benefit of people throughout the world. That this caught the eye of folks that came into India, not very popular folks, but if we look at the Mughals, Akbar, who, he was sort of the last person standing, and he elevated to the status of emperor and ruled for so long, fascinated by the wisdom, not only of the yogis, but the wisdom of the rabbis, the wisdom of the Jesuits, the wisdom of the Vaishnavas, the wisdom of the Shaivas, and the financial acumen of the Jainas. And then his would-be grandson successor, Darashiko, carried on that tradition of let's translate this knowledge literature from Sanskrit into Persian. And these beautiful summaries were put forth at the Yoga Vasishta, which was sort of the gateway text through which the Islamic scholars could learn the principles and practices of Vedas. And we know that that crashed when Aurangzeb killed Darashiko and sent his head to his dad. It's just so sad, Shah Jahan. But nonetheless, the literature remains from that period of mutual interest and keen investigation. And then as the Mughal Empire waned and as the British imperial leaders came, so also there was a moment in history sort of sparked by Madame Blavatsky, who was of Russian origin, and then carried forward by Annie Besant, who was an English woman who had settled in India, who had discovered Krishnamurti, and all of a sudden we're in modernity. And starting in the 18th century, in the 19th century, grand translation projects were undertaken, where into German, into English, into French, these masterpieces of Sanskrit literature were rendered in a way readable and accessible. They ended up in the homes of the transcendentalists in New England, Emerson and Thoreau. And there was, in the salon world of the 19th century, this enthusiasm for global wisdom. And eventually, Swami Vivekananda very famously decided to come to the Parliament for the World's Religions, of the World's Religions held in Chicago in 1893. Actually wrote Raja Yoga, his description of Patanjali's Eightfold Yoga, while living in Pasadena, California. And then a few years later, Paramahansa Yogananda in 1920 arrived in the United States, settled in Los Angeles, and taught for over 30 years, created a very innovative system of mail order practices of Kriya Yoga. And he also initiated, when he had visited back in India, initiated Mahatma Gandhi to Kriya Yoga and planted planetary ideas about that all-important embrace of ahimsa is the highest value, as we know from Mahabharata. A wonderful African-American Black theologian called Howard Thurman spent 1935 and 1936 in India. He met with Mahatma Gandhi, and Gandhi asked him, how do you manage to practice the faith of your oppressors? And the scourge of slavery, the remnants of slavery, echo throughout the centuries. And although Howard Thurman is a freedman, his grandparents had lived in slavery, chained, sold, property, not even regarded as fully human, only 3/5 human. And Howard Thurman took in that question from Gandhi. And by this time, Gandhi had discovered his love of the Spita Prajna section, the end of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which we memorized in our ashram and chanted forth, all 72 verses in unison in English. We also memorized in Sanskrit the entire second pada of the Yoga Sutra in English and chanted it forth in our studies. But Howard Thurman looked at the narrative in Jesus and said, it is the dispossessed that carry the spirit of Jesus, that Jesus' suffering reflects the suffering that we as Black people have endured for centuries. And he wrote this beautiful book that came to inspire the civil rights movement of the United States in the 1950s and 60s. A book that was on the bedstand of Martin Luther King the morning that he was assassinated. It's called Jesus and the Disinherited. And it gave Gandhi a new portal for changing the world. And just as Gandhi helped overthrow British imperial colonial rule that was literally periodically inflicting famine and death on millions of Indians, so also by holding dearly to, first, ahimsa, do no harm, and second, satyagraha, speak the truth, tell people about suffering, their own suffering, let them know that it has a cause. And social suffering, let them know there's a history of oppression, and let people find their voice and rise up. So what happened in the civil rights movement is that voting rights were put in place for Black people. The color bar was erased so that people could mingle freely in restaurants and hotels. And another change happened that allowed us to be here today. The history of immigration has been an exclusionary history in the United States. In the 1920s, Asians were excluded, and the few that were already there had suffered for so many years under policies of only men allowed and no miscegenation. That is, no mixing of one race with another. And in 1965, that changed, and the people of India were given access. The people of Africa were given access to migrate to the United States. People of East Asia, given Philippines, Indonesia, were allowed to move and build a life in the United States. And in 2045, people from all of those different places of genetic origin will be the majority within the United States of America. And that law paved the way for people on student visas, such as my own guru, to settle within the United States, and allowed people like Swami Satchidananda to be here and to teach and to share yoga. Now, modern yoga, I just want to sort of put this together a little bit with some modern history that many of you already know, that Swami Kuvalyananda in Lonavala, the Ghats from Mumbai, building on work already established, in a sense, building on work already established by Yogendra down in Mumbai, opened this magnificent research institute. He himself, Kuvalyananda, became Mahatma Gandhi's other really sort of larger than life yoga teacher. And there's a marvelous correspondence that's in the archives at Kaivalyadham of Gandhi wanting to get his blood pressure down. And what can I do? I've got to keep my health strong in order to do what I need to do for freedom. And he was given a very gradual Sarvang Asana regimen that included sort of actually a board that was to be elevated a little bit every day. And Gandhi said, I'm just going to do the shoulder stand straight up. And Kaivalyananda said, please, you could kill yourself with that high blood pressure. And if you don't do it gradually, it would be the end of you, and that would be the end of our freedom, and it would be the end of yoga. So please calm down. So Gandhi rather sheepishly said, oh, Guruji, I will do this. Then we know Krishnamacharya had studied yoga in various places, settled in Mysore, and then trained his own son, Deshkachar, Iyengar, and Pattabhi Joyce, who have trained so many Americans, and then Swami Shivananda up in Rishikesh, a great blessing because he was a Southerner teaching in the North. And what language did they have in common? It was English. So he wrote more than 200 books in English language and created a worldwide network of great yoga teachers. And as that first wave of the yogis in America, of Yogananda and Vivekananda, gave way to the second wave of people such as my own guru, was the only woman in their midst, and Swami Rama, Swami Shivananda's disciples like Vishnu Devananda and Satchidananda, Amrit Desai, a few others, and then people such as myself, dedicating their lives to these principles and practices. Now we have a yoga that is fully modern, a yoga that is open for inspection, that is scientific analysis, and a yoga that is now infusing throughout the academic world and throughout even business and wellness worlds. So when I landed in Los Angeles and in the company of people from the Vedanta Society and of course the original disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, there was, to my thinking, a need for greater levels of understanding. And I began a study group where we chanted and recited each of the sutras of Patanjali every third Wednesday night for 5 years. We had people from all the different walks of yoga and the academic sphere. And then we began for the then hundreds and now thousands of yoga teachers, not only in California, but now with the benefit of online learning throughout the world, but particularly America, a program of study that includes learning Sanskrit, that includes depth study of Yoga Sutra, Sankhya Karika, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, knowledge about the history of yoga and these wonderful teachers who have brought yoga to us, that we then, after having certificated so many hundreds of people, not only in yoga philosophy, but also in an emerging field called yoga therapy, we initiated a graduate program modeled on Somaya University in Mumbai and the SVS program in Bangalore, a program in yoga studies that is now creating folks that are becoming leaders in university settings, in college settings, in business settings, and are many of them themselves opening their own yoga studios, grounded in a life of practice and ground it in an understanding of yoga that is informed philosophically, linguistically, multiculturally. And with this, we are in partnership with programs such as your own. And we've been so delighted to see the dawning of the more than 4 academic programs dedicated to the study and practice of yoga, as well as the more than 100,000 basic health clinics that will hire yoga people in order to let people take their traditional practices of prayer, of daily ritual, and see how these age-old practices, including attention to diet, can be good for not only the human body, the human mind, human emotions, but be good for society worldwide and for people truly of all faiths. So yoga does not discriminate. Yoga, sarvodaya. Yoga has the capacity to lift up everyone. So thank you for your attention, and I salute the good work of this conference moving forward. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful insights on your practical, your experiences also, and shedding light upon many aspects of yoga and its relation with Jainism, Buddhism, and some parts of even history also that you have linked upon. So that is really very wonderful to hear too. So I once again thank you for your keynote address. Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Madhusudan Penna, Vice Chancellor of our university, to kindly deliver the presidential address.
Thank you, Srinivasi. Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. At the outset, I would like to thank the keynote speaker, respectable Chapli sir, and our chief guest, Professor Srinivas Varkidi sir, and the real Atithi, our Arindam Chakravarti sir, and on behalf of the Indic Academy, Professor Nagaraj Paturi, Professor Jayaraman sir, they were also present, and I would like to thank you all from bottom of my heart. As all our participants have understood, so this is recent trends in yoga and research avenues. So in a way, we will be deliberating throughout these lectures on the yoga, its legacy and its various trends, and what subjects are still left in that for further research. So as students of yoga of our university, I request all the researchers and other participants also to take yoga studies very seriously. As Jnaneshwar Maharaj says in the 15th chapter of Jnaneshwari, that unless you have utmost respect for the subject and dedication, you cannot expect completion in that. You cannot expect mastery in that. So you may get some verbal knowledge, some informative knowledge, but it cannot transform you completely. So that problem is there. And we have luckily got this sacred knowledge, the great wisdom from our ancestors who had practiced it with all sincerity. So we know that in the Vedas there are references, in the Puranas there are references, in the Tantra Shastra there are references. And we can also see a kind of indelible impression on the later several other systems also, which have very succinctly followed this yoga. So if we compare, we can find there that the influence of the Vedic texts on the Purana and Tantra Shastra, and influence of all these on the later yoga texts, right from the time of Bhartrhari. Bhartrhari himself was a great yogi. So Bhartrhari, and later we find during the time of Adi Shankaracharya also great many yogins, accomplished yogins like Mandan Mishra, Kumarila Bhatta. So they were all great yogins, and Shankaracharya was himself a great yogi. That sometime back there was an article in German language, Shankara, their yogin, order their Advaitin. So it wanted to throw light on this aspect of Shankaracharya, whether we should take him as a Vedanti or a yogi, because he appears to be a fine synthesis of all these things. So a great yogi, there is no doubt in that. And very unfortunately, the later writers on the life of Shankaracharya had mixed several things, including Anandagiri, including our Madhava. So they had included very typical episodes like Shankaracharya explained to Padmapada that there was Matsyendranatha, his student was Gorakhnatha, and all Gorakhnatha story was explained. And now we know that Gorakhnath belonged to the 11th century after Shankaracharya, but such anomalies may be found in the ancient text also sometimes, because the later writer, he had all this before him, so he is tempted to include all this information so as to make it more appealing and useful also to the aspirants of yoga. So this we find in the life of Shankaracharya, but later in the 10th century also we find a very fine yogi in the form of Bhagavad Ramanujacharya. And in his life story also we find some episodes in which he had shown the yogic achievements, like in Melkote also, in driving away the ill force and getting back the princess to the senses. So all this was great achievement according to the Yoga Shastra. So they had performed that. And Madhvacharya, as we all know, is an incarnation of Vayudeva, and he was also a great yogi. Apart from these, we had great accomplished yogins like Shuka Brahma, and in recent times, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Raman Maharshi, Vivekananda, Sadashivendra Saraswati, and our Bhaswati Tikakar, Hariharananda Aranyak. So all these had contributed a lot to the development of this Shastra through their personal experiences. So unless you have personal experience, you cannot venture into the yoga. That is the problem, because most of this will be only information, and you cannot have a first-hand knowledge of this Shastra. So that's why it is said Anubhuti. This is very important. Shankaracharya also somewhere in the Bhashya, Anubhava Vidyaya Phalam. That means ultimately your Vidya should mature into your Anubhava. You should take you to that particular experience, and Yoga Shastra speaks about that kind of experience. But the problem is whether it is tested knowledge or not. So nowadays in the modern institutions, most of the knowledge is either questioned or put to question, like whether it can be tested and evaluated, and laboratory evidence. So all this they have recently brought into studies in the form of research, and that's therefore everybody starts questioning, including Kaivalya. So they start question Kaivalya also, whether Kaivalya possible. Who can tell about Kaivalya? Because Kaivalya is a kind of hypothesis that the Sankhya Yoga propose, and unless you experience, you cannot tell, and when you experience, you cannot tell. So that is the problem. Yasya amatam tasya matam, yasya matam navedasaha. That is the big problem. So therefore, we have to understand the knowledge structure of this particular Shastra is or should be limited to few topics which can be verified and shared with others also. That thus the yoga wisdom can be properly communicated, and for that all research tools can be properly devised also. So keeping this in view, our modern researchers should venture into the different aspects of yoga, like the yoga, as Varkhedi sir also said, and now beautifully our keynote speaker Professor Chris has brought into light that several aspects are there. And once you choose a particular topic, focus on that, you will have a kind of avenue in that, and you can get a lot more information from that, which can be shared with others also. Because each stream, like the Buddhist, the Jaina, Hindu, Tantra, so all these have contributed in their own way. And apparently there may be some contradictions, but these contradictions are sometimes not very serious, because the ultimate goal of all the systems is the same, self-realization, and actually in a way making this life a complete one and divine. So this is actually what all humans feel, most of the humans feel, that this is a great rare chance that I have got. And as Arvind Ghosh says, the life is a paradox with God for its key. So this is the paradox, and we have to search for its key, and all human beings make efforts in their own way. Some people get tired on the way, and they just stop their effort, and some other proceed, and they reach some point, and some other again they march ahead, and finally they get the result. So this is in a way completely personal. The yoga experience is completely personal, that at a moment you cannot share with others, and whatever is shared is not the ultimate knowledge. That is the paradox in yoga. So that's why when Patanjali Maharshi also talks about the various stages of yoga, like Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, he is very careful, because he has in his mind the limitations of all this, that a Shastra also has its limitations. As Bertrand Russell says, that mathematics in science also has its limitations, that it cannot bring into its jurisdiction everything on the earth. No, it cannot do that. It has some limitations. Similarly, all the Shastras, they have their own limitations, and they want to prepare that particular aspirant for a particular experience or a particular vision or direction, so that the person can prepare himself and get that vision. And when yoga is talking about a grand vision like the Ritambhara Prajna or Dharmameka Samadhi, actually it has the summum bonum of all life, human life, Kaivalya. But Kaivalya is just a hypothesis. You cannot directly get it, or no assurance there. It is personal. So other things can be explained. So Yoga Shastra says, you first get into this path, you will get these experiences, and as you mature in this path, you will get various other experiences also. So Patanjali Maharshi says, these are the experiences that can be assured. These are the various stops that you can reach there. And of course, you may encounter several other hindrances, and you may fall from your yoga practice also. Everything is possible on this, and provided you march ahead, this is the result you will definitely get. So this way, Patanjali Maharshi assures. And in this path, we find that the yoga is a complete science, art, a shastra, a kala. So everything mixed, because it prepares the body, prepares the mind, prepares the intellect, and it actually brings a kind of fineness in all these, so that human life can be elevated to a higher level. Arvind Ghosh also says that it is a kind of oscillation between the infrasentient and the suprasentient, and one has to raise himself from them. Otherwise, life is wasted. So when this is the goal, that I have to make myself divine or complete or very purposeful, then yoga is the only way. As I told you, it prepares the body through Shat Kriya, through asana and pranayam, so that the skeletal system, muscular system, and the circulatory system, all the three get to a particular balance. And as Sir said in the beginning, that samatvam yoga uchyate, ultimately this balance itself is yoga. And at one level, this brings balance among all these three systems in the body. Then we have the pranayama. Through pranayama, the nervous system, the respiratory system, and the most important, the all neurological, so that they get coordinated. So a kind of balance is felt there. So there will be a balance in the emotions also. There will be a balance in your response to, reaction to external stimuli. So this kind of balance can be achieved through the practice of yoga. Therefore, he says it is samatvam yoga uchita. And another thing, very importantly, as Vyasabhashya points out, Vyadhisthana Pramada Samshayalasya Avirad Bharantadashna Alaptagun Vikatva, etc. So in all these, the first obstacle is Vyadhi. And most of the people carry some Vyadhi, some disorder in their body. Still, they try for the fruit of yoga. And some people get to the intellectual level, some people get to the emotional level, and they stop there. Throughout life, they will be just passing their time there only. And now, Patanjali Maharshi says, this is the first obstacle, that your body is not prepared, or is it prepared for the yoga experience? If it is not prepared, then you prepare it first. So he says, Vyadhi is nothing but Dhatu Karana Vaishamyam Vyadhi. So it is a kind of imbalance in the Dhatu, that means various humors in the body, various hormones and all this, and Karana, that means the sense organs. If proper coordination is not there, the equilibrium is disturbed. And he says that is Vyadhi. And all yoga progress is hampered there only. So that is Vyadhi. And there, if you have a balance in the Dhatu and Karana, that is Swasthya, Swasthitihi. That swasthyam can be achieved. That is the balance, samatvam yoga uchyate, that actually starts there. And then we have the emotional level, psychological. And I observe that throughout our life, 95% of our life is spent in the emotional state only. That means we fall prey to the emotions, and we will be giving reactions and responding to the society. So throughout life, we will be spending most of the life in the emotional one. So there will be imbalance. And yoga says, there also you try to get a kind of balance, samatvam yoga uchite. And intellectual level, see, intellect is the natural faculty that is given to all the human beings equally, but people use it differently. So that intellect, if it is not properly used for the welfare of the mankind, then a life is wasted. And many people we observe that they are wasting their life because their intellect is not properly guided. And yoga helps us channelize all these forces, our body, our psyche force, our intellect. It gives a proper channel to all these, so that our forces are focused, and a very useful or purposeful life is lived, and the objective of life can be properly achieved. As such, there cannot be any objective of this life also. In yoga, they say, when Yogi Veman also approached his teacher and said, many people are trying for some objective, you please teach me what is that. He says, do you think there is an objective? Ultimately, there is no objective at all, but still some objective should be there. If Kaivalya is the objective, then all efforts are useless. And below Kaivalya, for all these asamprajnata, through that asamprajnata saparakashta dharmamega samadhi, as Vijnana Bhikshu says, if we get to that, then okay, dharmamega may be the state that Lord Buddha achieved, Vardhamana Mahavira achieved, and several other also achieved, that they could perceive a different world which we cannot imagine. See, we are exposed to a different world which is almost artificial, because we are living in a society where everything is artificial intelligence. I'm very sorry to say that artificial intelligence, in the sense that we use the currency, some paper, and we print something on that, somebody's signature, we attribute value to that, and we perform everything, all transactions. So such many things are there. So this is part of the society, and we are leading this kind of life. And when we observe the lives of Vardhaman Mahavira, even Sadashivendra Saraswati and other yogins, so they had a different vision of this. I think that a kind of bird, when it looks at the earth from some height, it sees the earth like an Agnikunda, like a fireball. It is its vision. And the yogi also gets a vision of the world, that the same thing does not appear in the same manner to him. So that is the difference, that a drishti is achieved. This is the Shastra drishti they are talking about. In Vedanta Sutra, we may have Shastra drishtya upadesho vamadevavat, etc. But here, the Shastra drishti is that kind of vision that a person gets by regular practice of yoga and study of the Shastra. When these are combined, then a vision is opened. And when the aspirant looks at the world, tries to understand the world, tries to accommodate himself in the world, tries to bring a kind of synthesis in all the activities of the world, then that vision will help him and it will take him to the higher level. And I would like to request all the researchers here that don't think that whatever you know is ultimate and final. Please share with others, discuss with others, learn from others, and enrich your knowledge all the time. And whatever is happening in the world in your subject, you should keep abreast with that knowledge, so that you can really contribute something in a very positive manner in your subject. So in this way, the physiology part, anatomy part, and yoga effect on that, psychology part, IP Sachdeva wrote a beautiful book on that, and Abhedanand also worked on that. The psychology part is very, very useful, that we have not explored that. So there is a lot unexplored in the Yoga Shastra that the young researchers have to work on that and explore. And I tell you, you will be surprised to find the elements of physics in the Yoga Shastra, like the various parinama. The parinama itself is a beautiful topic, having some empirical value. Because when you talk about the dharma parinama, lakshana parinama, avastha parinama, bhutendriyeshu vyakhyataha, that itself presents a plethora of other subjects also. So I request you that you open up yourself, and the yoga will be a very macro subject for you. It will be a very magnanimous subject for you, that you will find everything, epistemology, eschatology, you find the metaphysics in that. And as I told you, the physics part of that, and especially in the Bhashya, when he says that the pradhanam appears, dhruvam chalam cha. See, it is the kinetic and the static aspect of the matter he's talking about. And it is the quantum physics theory, that the matter, whether it is moving or not moving, that is really $1,000 question. Because the matter is moving and not moving also. Because moving, you cannot ascertain that the matter is in motion, but at the same time everything is moving. So as Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter says, nirgunam gunabhoktrucha bahirantasya bhutanam achalam chalamevacha. So it is achalam chalamevacha. So it is moving and it not moving, because Heisenberg also experienced this anomaly, that the particle appears to be moving, at the same time it is still there. So the position and momentum of the particle cannot be ascertained. That's what he felt. So all these can be found in the yoga, provided you are properly equipped to get to this knowledge. And as I told you, psychology is there. And very importantly, what happens to the person after death? What is his true identity? Whether he is the body, mind, emotions, intellect, what? So all these ideas are discussed in this. And okay, Tadantra Pradipatta Ramhari Samparishvakta, etc. Brahma Sutra also talks about that. But in Yoga Sutra, you find Jati Desha Kala Vyavhitanam Anantaryam Smriti Samskarayo Reka Rupatvat. So these are the beautiful sutra that open our vision to the secrets of our human life. And consciousness is a very attractive subject in this in Indian philosophy, as you all know, that consciousness, as Descartes says, limited to mind, but our people say it is beyond mind. So consciousness, or Atma Chaitanya, is not just mind. This is exactly opposite to what Descartes proposed in his French philosophy. So we find the opposite of that, because we very clearly say, as Patanjali Maharshi says, Sada jnatas chitta vrittayaha tat prabhoho purushasya aparinamitva. So there is somebody observing, and that is the Sarva Sakshi Chaitanya. So this is a beautiful observation, contribution of Indian philosophy through Yoga Shastra. There are other Shastras also equally contributing to enrichment of the Indian philosophy. But when we talk about the Yoga Shastra, it is, as Varkhedi sir said, it is the Shastra which has permeated, which has filled with all the Shastras. Because in the Vaisheshika Darshana, towards the end of the Vaisheshika Sutra, we find a clear reference to yoga. They say, yes, you have to practice yoga and get the experience. So for that, you approach yoga only, they say. And Nyaya Shastra, tadvidai saha samvadaha, when they say that some yogic experiences are there, they are authentic there, authority there, not we. And similarly, Yogaja Pratyaksha also they have accepted. So all this proves that yoga has a very rich storehouse of wisdom, but we have to open up ourselves, expand our knowledge, and study more and more with all sincerity. Then we can properly know and appreciate the value of yoga, and new research areas can be explored. You can work on them. So this is what our learned speakers have told today, that you please dedicate yourself sincerely to the study of yoga. Do research with all your might, with all your focus. Then only something useful can be given to the society. Otherwise, it will be just a repetition. So whatever our ancestors had produced, we are just repeating, restoring, and reproducing. So just think of yoga in this manner also. With these words, I just stop here, but I thank the learned speakers, Professor Chris sir, Professor Varkhedi sir, and Indic Academy authorities, because they have really helped us. And Chris sir, just I sent a mail, and very generously, very affectionately, he had accepted that and blessed us through his wonderful experience-based knowledge. I know that he is a profound scholar in Buddhism, Jainism, and when we study the Vishuddhimagga of Buddhism, the Tripitaka, I found very surprising things there, that 38 types of meditation are mentioned, and Archishmati, Jyotishmati, the Gandhavati, the Pravrittis are explained there. So it is really wonderful world that you will be stepping into. So throughout the lectures, you will be listening to wonderful speakers, and you will definitely get to know the marvelous things of yoga towards the end of this series. And time to time, we will definitely invite learned scholars. And I once again thank Chaplain sir, because you have accepted our invitation very affectionately. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you all. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. For your wonderful Upadesha, I would call it, for our students. Further, I would march towards the end of the session. That is the vote of thanks. I myself will be presenting vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank the keynote speaker, Professor Christopher Chappell, for agreeing our invitation, accepting our invitation, and kindly spending his valuable time with us. And then I thank the chief guest of today's session, Professor Srinivas Varkhedi sir, for giving his time, even though he was in a very busy schedule. He made it sure that he is present in this session. And then I would definitely once again thank our Vice Chancellor, Professor Madhusudan Penna sir, for presiding over the session. And I thank our convener, Professor Kalapani Agasti madam, for being the driving force and coordinating with everyone in this regard. And I would like to thank the Indic Academy authorities, especially Professor Nagaraj Paturi sir, and Dr. Jayaraman Mahadevan sir. And even I would like to thank all the participants and our head of the departments, deans, and faculty of our university for being patiently waiting for the first 10 minutes, even though we were delaying. Even then, many participants have patiently waited, and they are all have been with us through the whole session. So I would like to thank one and all. And I would like to inform that we are having around 7 invited lectures that will be starting from tomorrow. Tomorrow we have yeah. So tomorrow we have sorry, 1 second. We have a Professor Madhusudan Penna sir's lecture on the tradition of Natha Yoga and integrated approach. So we'll be having this session at 7 p.m. That is tomorrow at 7 p.m. So please be on time, and it will be so it is a traditional approach, the traditional aspect of Yoga Darshana. So we have planned multiple lectures on different aspects from the yoga, starting from quantum consciousness to psychology, towards history and archaeology and Swara Yoga and etc. So there are very much interesting topics ahead. So please join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. sharp. So we'll be ending the session with the recitation of Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you.